Hey everybody, this is Dr. Ben Pearl with FitFoot U, and today I have from across the pond Nick Knight, and he's going to talk to us about his exciting clinic, NK Active. He has he's a faculty at what's the university, Nick? That you're
University of Southampton. I'm a visiting lecturer.
uh-huh. And I'm anxious to hear about it because I'm one of those almost baby boomer athletes. I've done a lot of my own rehab, but I want to hear about your clinic and what makes it unique
Yep,
to getting all kinds of athletes.
perfect. Well, thank you. Lovely to meet you. It was. So what do we do that's different? Really, is we basically strip out all the background noise. We just make it nice and simple, nice and basic, and we will sit down the first time we meet an athlete, a patient, and it doesn't matter if they're an athlete or a non-athlete, as long as they've got a vision and a goal to be more active and recover from an injury, we can help them. And the first time we meet them, we do no treatment. It is just a conversation. It's about getting to know them. What are their barriers? What's their previous experiences? Why hasn't stuff worked in the past? What's their expectations? Because I'm a big believer if you don't manage that bit correctly first, you're not going to win. Then what we then do before we start any rehab process, we've got handheld dynamometers in clinic to physically measure how strong people are. So we can then work out, okay, what's your capacity now? What can you do? Okay, now let's build programs together that is personalized for you. And we'll tend to say 5 sessions over a 3 to 4 month period, leaving the gap between each appointment longer and longer to teach people then how they can then manage this themselves. And then at the end of the process, we repeat that strength testing again to show them the progress that they have made. And we have found that from, I think it's around the last 400 or 500 patients we've done that journey on, we achieve the patient's goals 97% of the time. And at 6, 12, and 18 months, people aren't getting re injured. So I think that's what we sort of do differently. We put a very structured, personalized, detailed approach in that overcomes the patient's barriers. And we constantly keep reminding them that the importance of this is consistency. So if they've only got an hour in their day and they've only got it in 10-minute chunks, don't give them a program that's going to take them an hour to do in one go. Give them stuff that they can do in 10-minute chunks. If they go to the gym 3 times a week and they go for 90 minutes religiously, then give them a program that they can do in those 90 minutes religiously. I think it's about making it all personalized to the individual and just sort of getting rid of all that background noise, as it were.
It's funny you mentioned background noise because one of the big things that I've learned is that when I do an exercise that I thought, even with my training, that I was doing correctly. For instance, um, I have to work on glutes like a lot of people because so much of what we do is sagittal. Even though I play a lot of soccer, and you'd think you'd be getting lateral. And when I went to the American Association of Podiatric Sports Medicine meeting just in Seattle, they had a physical therapist that was working with a workshop, and the hip hikes that I was doing, I was engaging
Your
my
sound
I
has disappeared.
oh,
Oh, you're back now. You're back.
okay.
There we go.
The hip hikes that I was doing, the um the compensation was with my ITB, and I wasn't in fact using my glute. So the physical therapist had me engage the glute, focus on the glute, actually put my hand on my glute so I could feel the contraction of the glute. What are some of the subtle things that you have found in doing the functional rehab that, okay, we always thought it was this way, but you know what? This is a better way, or this eliminates some of the, like I was having the white noise of the ITB overcompensate in
Yeah.
that particular maneuver.
So for me, it's I think it's even simpler than that. A lot of people we see, in a nutshell, just aren't loaded enough. So I think for me, a lot of the white noise is the fear, the anxiety around doing something with a heavier weight. So we have strict targets. So, for example, if you come to see us with an Achilles tendinopathy and you're a runner, well, we like you to be able to lift a minimum of 1.5 to 2 times body weight through soleus. We want you to be able to back squat body weight, deadlift 1.5 times body weight. And we set these barriers high. And some of the patients are like, well, I can't do this. And you then showed them, well, actually, you're telling me you can't lift 60, 70 kilos. But then you then load up some, we have in the UK, we have these bag for lives. And people go, when they go shopping, you put all your groceries in there. And we found that you can actually put 50 kilograms quite comfortably in some of these bags. And then we show people, well, actually, this weight plate has 20 kilograms weight on it, but you lift your children up. You do that, and you're actually doing a lot of this stuff already. So it's almost demedicalizing it, de-gyminizing it. That's a new word, isn't it? To show people actually you can do some of this with the kit around your home. So again, just removing those barriers and that noise. And sometimes we'll say to people, look, your technique's not perfect, but I'd rather you do it rather than not do it at all. And we can work on that over time.
Nick, is it fair to say that this load then, as one of the dominant features, and I think that's a great point that a lot of people don't highlight, is more important for you than, let's say, okay, I injured my Achilles and I want to do the eccentric phase versus the concentric. You know, there's things that start to, play into the literature and the discussion and the meetings and the clinics, that it all becomes, okay, now we just got to do eccentric. And then it's sometimes maybe missing the forest through the trees with some of the other things that you're raising.
Correct.
Are we doing enough load?
And I think we can get hung up a lot of the time in healthcare about eccentric, concentric. The research shows this, the research does that. But if you then look at a lot of these research papers, a lot of them done on young American collegiate athletes. They're not done on your general population, your older athlete or the person that's not an athlete, just active. And we tend to find that actually when I speak to our patients, they don't really care about all of that. They just want to be able to be simple. And we found, look, if we just load them properly, actually, if you do eccentrics or concentrics, it doesn't really matter as long as the load is there.
Nick, if people want to find out more about your clinic and the stuff that you're writing about and working on, and there might be some other projects, how would they seek that?
Yeah, so you can just on most social media channels, we're just NK Active Clinics on Instagram, on Facebook, and then the website just nkactive.co.uk, or just ping me an email, nick@nkactive.co.uk, and yeah, we can always have a chat.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this segment today, and I look forward to collaborating further. I hope you'll join the Biomechanics Summit that I'm going to be doing, because I think this would be a great topic that a lot of people haven't thought about in terms of, hitting those upper thresholds that you've just mentioned.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. All right, so I'll edit this part out, Nick. Now we can just talk casually, and if there's anything pithy that we say along the way, I can started to do, because we're all vying for time, and you might as well juice it, because then to set up another meeting, and we're going 20 minutes on when we're going to set the meeting up.
It's better just to, if you're here, just do short,
knock
sharp
it out,
snippets.
knock it
Knock
out.
it out. You're there,
and even what we did was maybe a little longer than people's attention span these days. It's frightening. But what I've heard is like 4 minutes. If you can get 4 minutes, that's a really good threshold if you can get that. What I'm doing this thing today with Kiernan, and maybe you can give me your thoughts. Steve Pribbett, who has done a lot of biomechanics stuff, and he's retired now. I thought he came up with a great way when people talk about. Kiernan gave me the topic flat foot, which I'm not. Flat foot is so fraught with a lot of things where people can take it the wrong way. But what
Agreed.
Steve said that I like is that let's not worry so much about the flat foot. Let's see, does that flat foot causing some compensation? Is the flat foot flattening because you have a longer leg, on that side? Those are the things that we should be keying in on.
100%. If you look at, I don't know, Gabriel Selassie, one of the greatest marathon runner in his generation, feet flat as a pancake. No one's going to change what he does because he could bash out a marathon in 2 hours and 10 minutes. People just need to forget about a flat foot and just think, is it actually relevant or not? That's the key thing. And why is it flat? Is it flat because it's hip driven? Is it flat because they've got a ruptured spring ligament? People just take it so much out of context, and people are so quickly flat foot. Here's a set of orthoses, and it just grinds my gears because you just need to think bigger. You can't just treat the foot as a foot. The foot is attached to the rest of the lower limb, and you need to look at it as one. And that's what I love about the 3D gait is treating the limb as one unit and looking at it as one unit in each individual plane of motion, because people harp on about frontal plane. I don't frontal plane is not the issue. I think sagittal plane is your key plane of function. I think if you get sagittal plane right, I think you solve a lot of problems.
And I know that Simon Bartold has been also echoing that same thing
Mm,
about the sagittal plane because the torques are actually higher in the
yeah, they're
sagittal
much
plane
higher.
than the frontal.
That's where you get the peak braking forces. And people talk about initial impacts and FZ1. Benno Niggs proved that that's not relevant. Actually, the work Nig does on muscle tuning and muscle vibrations is much more relevant. And I done a bit of Simon invited me to be a part of when it was the Solomon had sort of an advisory group as it were that I was part of with him, and we had conversations around the muscle tuning effects and vibrations, and actually what it come down to, the best way to manage that is lean muscle mass. So in a nutshell, the stronger you are, the better the body deals with it. So it's yeah, people just overcomplicate stuff and scaremonger people into stuff, and it grinds my gears. Hence why we do what we do, and this is why I have physical therapists from the States message me saying, "Can you help me rehab this plantar fascia remotely and whatnot?" And it's
Well,
because
well,
just keep it
well, you
simple.
mentioned you mentioned vibrations, and I would encourage you, and we can talk further about this thing. This is something that is electromagnetic, and it's just basically copper wire creating a magnetic field. And for years, people were looking at like very low Gauss things like magnets and shoes, which are worthless because they're just not producing enough of a field. I can tell you from personal experience, and I'd be interested if what things are in the UK, because this is still emerging here in the US. I had a soccer sprain. I could not bear weight. It was a delayed thing. When I say sprain, it was like a capsulitis of my ankle, cutting on turf,
Yeah.
etc. Didn't really mount till 2 hours after the game. I was fine after the game, and then all of a sudden it just built up. Who knows? Maybe I have a low grade gout flare too. I mean, because there's
Hmm.
things that but I think it was more just the delayed reaction because I've had those things even when I was younger, and you do a lot of load. The short of it is that I went in on a Sunday about in the afternoon as the pain was mounting, and I said, I'm just going to go to my office and check this out. I did it 20 minutes, and I'm like, as I'm doing it, the air pulse sensation is inhibiting the pain signal of the ache, right? So
Mm-hmm.
first I'm shutting down pain gate theory a little bit, or the open gate, because now I got a competing signal. Then as I got off, I'm like, wow, it's about 30-40% better in 20 minutes, which I mean, I suppose you could say, well, maybe laser could do that, or other modalities. How much is icing? What was really interesting to me is that, and again, this was an acute injury, not a chronic, but the next day, I'm like going back and forth to both feet. I could barely tell which one I had injured. So to me, sometimes it's just that catalyzing factor to get the body to start healing, to start pushing out some of the edema.
That's what we
What's been your experience with this and other modalities that
so with that hasn't reached the UK yet, to my knowledge. But what you're saying is to try and promote that initial healing response and to get people moving and reducing pain, that's what we use shockwave therapy a lot for. We found for us, we won't do shockwave therapy unless we're rehabbing someone. So we'll use shockwave therapy to dampen down the pain signals, as it were. Then it allows us to load the patient even more and get them back to activity. And I think there's also an element of, if you can, even if you buy a window of 10, 15 minutes where they can do something and it doesn't hurt, psychologically, that has a massive, massive positive impact, because they start relearning all those, the brain starts rewiring those pain gate cycles and whatnot.
I agree, and I'm going to give you an example of something very, very simple. When I had my ACL, they had, pool therapy as part of it.
Yeah.
I'm getting out of the pool, and just the buoyancy, not the buoyancy, but the water pressure. I got out of the pool for an hour. My knee was normal again. It didn't have that bogginess. So it
Yeah.
was, that was, I think, to your point of if you can trick the body into feeling normal again and having movement, that's part of the healing process, is movement of lymph and blood flow
Well,
and
it is. And then I think it also has a big biopsychosocial element of it. I say to some patients, sometimes the psychological effects and impacts of an injury can be actually worse than the physical aspect. Because if your brain is constantly sending messages that this hurts, you can't do this, the anxiety, the fear. So when we spend a lot of time, people, look, let's not chat about pain. Let's not worry about, does it hurt? Because I'll use the analogy, if you're crossing the road and you sprain your ankle, it hurts. If you cross your road, sprain the same ankle, but you're about to get run over by a truck, I can guarantee you your ankle will not hurt. The injury is the same, but the context in which it's happened is different. So the brain has the ability to change pain depending on which context and environment it's in. So pain isn't just a mechanical thing. And that's how I describe it to patients.
Yeah, and then you get all those beta endorphins in the heat of battle, right? As another factor.
Yeah.
Anything interesting that you would say about, particularly with flat foot or biomechanics, that in general, I mean, you've already mentioned several good points, but something else that you think is either being overplayed or something that just hasn't been looked at? We talked about the sagittal plane, we talked about load, we talked about the fit flat foot versus just looking at a flat foot. Any other hot topics that you are, thinking we need more of this?
No, it comes down to it just bottles down to the strength side of things, really. When we look at those people, they just don't have the strength where the strength needs to be to do the activity that they want to do. And when you then show patients and you demonstrate that and you show them, it's very powerful to patients. So we're lucky. We have the facilities. We have all the rehab facilities on site, but we also have a lot of evidence to show, well, you can do it remotely. And the key thing is building that rapport, explaining why, demonstrating, and you can do it over video. And yeah, I think people just need to not be fearful of a flat foot. And some will need foot orthotics, some won't. Some will need a Ritchie brace, some won't. Some will need surgery, some won't. We can't just pigeonhole everyone into the same box.